Hello and welcome to the second video where we're going to start talking about the walls, doors, some windows, possibly some floors and ceilings. What I've decided to do for this series of videos is we're actually going to create a really tall building, I think. Well, it's not going to be really tall, maybe 5 stories to start off with and we'll add to it later. But we'll focus the entire Revit video series on creating different floors and different areas. For instance, maybe one class will focus on the construction or casework for the welcome area, maybe a conference room, and we'll just focus on different areas of this tall building. That way we have one compact Revit file, or funhouse as we can call it, with different areas that have had focus. That way we start to build an actual project rather than have a bunch of fragments of projects. So we're going to want to keep this file and we're going to keep adding to it throughout the semester. So you're going to want to make sure that if there's any errors in your first submission, that you get those corrected for the second submission and so on and so forth. That way you don't have any problems, with the rest of the project. You're going to want to make sure you get your errors, if there are any, corrected before we move on. So in order to start this project, we're going to start where we left off last week. We're going to go ahead and create a grid system. From the grid system, we'll create our exterior walls and our core, and from the core, we'll decide how many levels, and then we'll also decide which level we want to start working with the interior walls. So to start off, we're going to create our grid. Like I said, interior designers often won't have to create a grid, but there's going to be a grid to work off of. So as long as we're in this class, we'll probably always create a grid just to get familiar with it. So I'm going to create some lines here. Let's see, I need Need 7 total. It looks like we only have 6 so far, so I need 1 more. There we go. So I need 7 this way. We'll space them later. One thing I want to point out is this elevation marker needs to be pulled out now that I've expanded my workspace. So it's good to not get that trapped inside of your space. It's just it's not a good approach. So you want to pull these guys out here, kind of align them again to recenter. We're probably going to have to move these once we add the other horizontal ones, but for now I'll just get them there. So this doesn't have to be perfect, right? Because an elevation, if let's say that this was a wall, an elevation marker is going to show the length of this wall no matter where it is, and it's not going to be offset. So technically I could have this here and it would achieve the same result as being in the center. However, drafting standards make it to the point where you kind of want to keep things nice and neat and in line. So, and you can see here by selecting the triangle, this tells me where my view starts and ends. So anything within this area is going to be seen, and we'll focus on those a little more later. So I've got 7 of these here. I'm going to go ahead and space them. Remember, with the first grid line, you're going to just go ahead and pin that in place because we don't want it to move. So everything's going to be based off of this point. So this, I told you before that Revit doesn't have a coordinate system. So if we pin this, let's just go ahead and say, hypothetically, now this is our 0 on the x-axis, okay? This is our 0 point because we're basing everything off of this point. So now I can come in here and I've just already decided that I'm going to make these 25 feet. And then I'm going to pin the second one so that it doesn't move anymore. And I'm just going to go down through here and make these 25 feet. Make sure you pin them. I know it's hard to remember to do it because I still sometimes get in the habit of keep moving and I'll forget to pin stuff, but you really want to make sure you lock stuff in place after you create it. Either pin it or lock it. All right. See, I get that one. Yeah. Okay. So there's one thing here that I don't like about my bubbles, and it's not necessarily wrong, but it's also not necessarily right. Again, that's going to depend on who you work for. But I like the bubbles to be along the bottom and up the right side. So I'm going to select each one of these and hit my check mark. Remember to bring my bubble down here, and then I'll uncheck the top one. So you can see that moves my bubble down here, which is a little more easy to read, I think. So I'm going to uncheck all of these and go down through here and move these down here. Oops. Let me get that guy there. Alright, so we've got these set up now, 1 through 7. They're spaced correctly, so now I need to go ahead and do the horizontal ones. And to make this project, or keep this project simple, we're going to work with a square building. So I'm just going to go back through and do the same thing and create my horizontals here. So grid lines again. This time I'm going to make sure that my bubble is placed correctly on the right side, so I don't have to go back through and check it. I wanted to show you that you can do that if your bubbles are on the wrong side. It's an easy fix. It just, the extra time will save here by just going this way. Now also notice these are counting numbers. In order to save even more time, I'm going to undo these by hitting Control Z. Control Z is going to back me up to this step. Right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and name this, I'm going to give this the letter A. And now I'm going to actually start again. And you'll see why I decided to name the first one A. If you remember from last week, it's going to automatically go with letters now. That way I don't have to click on each bubble after I'm done creating these and change the letter. So by undoing it and stepping back there, it kind of saved us a little bit of time. One more. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and make this grid line. I'm going to pin it in place. Okay, so now I've pinned this in place and I've pinned this and this grid line here in place. So technically, you can consider this for your drawing. Now you're not going to be able to ever enter any coordinate numbers or anything like that, but for your own reference, think of this as 0, 0, okay, where these two intersect. This is the corner of your building, or what will be the building. And these are also locked in place, so we can assume that every dimension that we do from here on out is actually going to be based off of these 2 points. So yes, Revit doesn't have a coordinate system. Yes, we can kind of create our own here in our own little relative world as far as the rest of this drawing is concerned. And that's one of the good things about grid points. So we've locked this in place. We're going to make these 25 feet. Remember, you pin it after you move it. This will be 25 feet. It looks like we're going to overlap here. I need to pin this one. I'm just going to kind of move these, click and drag. Alright, as I get this one, we got this one, so this next one, 25 feet, same thing. Pin it. Okay, we're going to move this. Click and drag to move them. We want to make sure that they stay in line here at the same time. We don't want to get anything out of order. We want to stay nice and neat. That's the idea of a technical drawing, is to stay nice and neat. Looks like I forgot this guy here. Now, the beauty of this is I already locked this 25 feet. Well, I pinned it. I didn't lock it. So we're still going to have to unpin that if you've pinned it. And you're going to have to move this one and then pin it separate. I was going to say if I had locked the dimension, it would move with it, but I didn't take that approach. I actually pinned it, so we'll have to redo this one. All right, so we've got these pinned in place. Obviously, these are showing up a little short, so what we can do here, if you remember, I'm not going to be able to drag that. Okay, I need to drag that, but if we've pinned these in place, it's not going to let us do that. So I'm going to select all of these and unpin them for a moment. And I'm going to select this first one again. Now you can see when I select this first one, there's a dashed line that comes across here. That tells me that if I move this one, it's going to move all of them, which is good. That's what we want. So I'm going to move that up so that it overlaps, a little bit. Doesn't have to be a lot. That'll work. And then remember, after we do that transition there, we need to select everything again. I did that by dragging a box across all the elements that I moved, and I'm going to pin those again. And by selecting everything at the same time, hitting pin, that'll let me drop that pin there. Now I need to move my elevation marker here out of the grid. And let's see, I'm going to select this and hold Control and select this other one. And move both of them at the same time. And, whoops, zoom in there. Move this over to here, so just to get it out of the way a little bit. And you can see here on this right side, this isn't lined up here, and we want to make sure that that stays nice and neat. So I'm going to unpin this first one and move that over to the dashed line. Shows me that they're all in line, and then I'll repin it again. Alright, so this is our grid line. You should have your grids 1 through 7, and then A through G, and that should be nice and neat. Your elevation markers should be somewhat centered and somewhat a good space away. You want to keep those out of your grid. They'll get in the way later. So the next step, we'll come back and we will focus on starting to create some exterior walls here. Alright, so we have our grid lines created, which is good. This is going to give us our reference for as far as where our wall placements are going to go. The next step would be to specify how many levels we're going to work with initially. And I think for the start of this, we'll work with 6 levels, and we'll add levels or get rid of levels as we don't need them. So if you remember, to add a level, you can't add a level in a floor plan view. I mean, if you think about it, it would be kind of hard to add a level in the floor plan view unless you drew some kind of square and specified a distance from the ground, which gets kind of messy. So Revit protects you in that sense and makes you go to an elevation view or a section view to create a level. So I'm just going to pick either one of these elevation views. These elevation views, again, correspond to these markers. So if I were to double click on this, it would give me the same effect as clicking on the north elevation or the east elevation and west elevation. So it's important to remember that these elements correspond to the views over here. It's also important to note, by default, Revit already gives you 2 levels to work with. So we're just going to add 4 levels onto the 2 levels that we already have. So I'm going to go to an elevation view. And you'll see that my grid lines are projecting up, okay? These represent the grid lines that we just created. It looks like our levels actually need to be moved over. So I'm going to drag that over. If your levels aren't appearing on the right side like that, you want to make sure that everything has an intersection here. So that would have been bad for that not to be all the way out here. And also we know we're going to add more levels here, so we're going to drag these guys up. Now remember, they're pinned because we pinned them before. So I need to select all of these and unpin them before I can move them up. So I'm going to unpin all of these again. And it's okay that you have to unpin and pin things. That just shows that you're being conscious of what you're doing with your objects, and that you're keeping a close tab on being able to move them and not being able to move them. But you just need to make sure after you unpin something, you go back and pin it again. So I select all of them and hit the pin tool again, and that'll pin those back in place. Now to add a level, I go back to the same place where the grid was, right above grid. Here's level. I can select level. And remember, the first place that you click is actually not the bubble. So the first place you click is the tail, and then you drag towards the bubble. So I'll just come over here and drag towards the right. Make sure you get that extension snap there. It'll save you some alignment time later in the future. like I said, we're going to go up to 6 levels here. And we're going to have to make the adjustments on the height. By default, these are at 10 feet. I actually want these to be at, I actually want my levels to be 12. Well, the first level I think we'll do some kind of, we'll do an open, maybe we'll do an opening later. So we'll go ahead and make this first opening 20 feet. And it went over top of our other level there, so you have to be cautious of which one you move next. So I'll drag this one above level 2 there. And it looks like we're going to need a lot more space. So I'm going to click all my bubbles once again, unpin these. And select this first one. And drag it up. Drag it up to there, and I'll pin these in place. Looks like that's the space we're going to be dealing with, so we're here now. This might be alright. I'm kind of just trying to limit the amount of times we have to pin these things, because that could get to be kind of tedious and unnecessary. So I'm just going to kind of drag these up here and space them so I don't have any overlapping issues later. Alright, so my first one should be still at 20, and it is. After I get it at 20, I need to pin it. Remember, we need to pin our levels as well. And this next one, from here on out, we're going to stick with 12 feet in between these. So I'll nail that at 12 feet, and I'll pin that. And 12 feet, pin that. 12 feet and pin that one, and then last but not least, 12 feet and pin that one. So I'm a little high on my grid lines. We can clean these up here later on. We might add more levels, we might not. We definitely know that this isn't the final drawing, so as far as this overhang and this overhang is concerned, I'm okay with this. Plus, we're going to have some walls added on level 6, possibly. So we'll leave the overhang here quite large because we don't know where we're going to go with this. Other than that, everything looks pretty good here. I want to make sure everything's pinned before I move on, and it is. Now let's take a look at these datums. As you can see here, level 1 corresponds to level 1 over here in floor plans. And that tells us that right now we're at 0 feet, 0 inches. Now if I select this line, we have more options. Obviously the checkbox is going to control the datum. Remember how we had our grid lines? This checkbox does the same thing. So if I turn that on and off, if I wanted to put the datum on the other side, I could do that. This guy here creates a break. If I had a bunch of levels that were close together and I needed some space, I could break the line there to bring that out. If I want to bring it back, I just drag it up until it's straight again. And that'll reset that. And this little circle moves it forward and back as we experimented. Now, because of the naming system, it's going to automatically name levels, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the dimension that's underneath of it corresponds relative to the ground level, or level 1. So this level is 68 feet from level 1, and so on and so forth. So these dimensions correspond to the dimension from this level to here. So 20 feet from here down to level 1. This is 32 feet from level 3 to level 1. So it doesn't have to do with the spacing here. It has to do with the spacing from the level to the ground level, or level 1. And we're actually going to go ahead and rename this level 1 now to ground level. So you can do that by clicking on the tag and just typing ground level. And it's going to give you this message: would you like to rename corresponding views? Now what this means is I've renamed my level 1 here, but I have a level 1 over here and a level 1 over here, that correspond to this level. So if I rename this, Revit's asking me, do I want to rename everything that corresponds to it? And obviously your answer here should almost always be yes, because you're going to have things named differently that correspond to the same level. So when you get this message, 99.9% of the time you're going to want to just hit yes. And by doing that, you'll see that it renamed this level to ground level and this level to ground level. So we're staying organized here by making sure everything responds to what it should respond to. Let's see. I think what I'll do, I'll actually name this, it doesn't really matter. We'll name it ground floor for now. So ground floor, ground floor, ground floor. And we'll go through here and name this first floor. This is actually, we were thinking about putting a mezzanine in. We can rename these things later. We'll just name that first floor for now. Second floor. Notice as I go down through here, these are renaming. I could just as easy say that I want my third level, which is actually, I have a ground level, first floor, second, so my numbers are off, so I want my level 4 to be the third floor, right? So I could, instead of clicking on the name here to rename it, I can just as easy come over here and hit rename, and rename this third floor. Enter, and that's going to ask me that same question, and you'll see here that it automatically updates. So these guys are linked. They're names of these things, the properties of these things. The names in the project browser represent the objects out here. So either way, the next one, we'll name this fourth floor. And yes, and you'll see it updates that. And last but not least, level 6 is going to be the 5th floor. So, this time we'll rename it out here, maybe. Whoops. Okay, so we've renamed our elevations now. We've renamed our floors over here. This will allow us to easily navigate, since we are starting with the ground floor and not a first floor. Now we know what floor represents what, and we don't confuse ourselves. So we pretty much took the time and set up the drawing with grid lines and levels ahead of time. So now when we need to draw walls and elevations and such, we know where we're headed. We don't have to stop and think about wall heights or anything like that. We know exactly where we're headed with this skeleton type system of grid lines and levels. Alright, so we're ready to add some walls. So we've created our levels, we've created our grid line. I'm going to go to the ground floor. And our grid lines, everything's still in order here. Everything looks good. Everything should still be pinned. Everything left right where we put it. So looks like we're pretty good there. So to add the walls, we're going to go to the wall command. And Revit is actually doing a good job to tell me that I haven't saved it. So if you haven't saved it, this reminder will come up at certain time intervals. You can change the time intervals here by setting remind intervals. You can go ahead and save the project, or you can save the project and set remind intervals. So I'll go ahead and save this project now. Let's see, we will save it in and hit save there. Okay, so thank you, Revit, for saving me in case the computer crashes. That's always helpful. It's always good to remember to save every once in a while, but when you're having so much fun, it's hard to just stop and hit save every once in a while. But try and hit save as often as possible. especially when you're working on public machines, because you just never know what kind of shape they're in. Any computer in general could just crash at any given time. So it's important to save as you go along. All right, so moving along here, we've created our wall, or we've selected wall. And if we remember from last week, whenever we go into a command, your modify is going to turn green, and it's going to turn the screen green anywhere that has to do with a property for this wall. So all of this stuff has to do with creating a wall, okay, all of this green stuff. And we'll hit all of it throughout the semester. The most important areas are this green bar here, and for the wall command, what's going on in here. So these are the types of walls you can draw. If you wanted to draw just a straight line segment, you would select this line. If you wanted to draw rectangle walls, polygons, circles, and arcs, you would select the according tool to draw that arc or a straight line. For this case, we've drawn a nice square grid here, so we're going to obviously use this line tool. Next, we need to specify the height. Now, whenever you see unconnected and a height in Revit, that means you're drawing a wall that has no reference. Okay, so that wall, no matter what you do to your levels, is going to be 20 feet. If you want it to, and sometimes you're going to want this, and that's fine, but we went through the trouble to set up all of our levels, right? So here's all of our floors. So if we're doing the exterior walls, we're going to go ahead and run this wall all the way up to the highest that it can go. Now, technically that might not be the right way to go about doing the exterior wall. It's going to depend on the wall section, the structure. You know, that's going to come from engineering and architecture. We're not too concerned about that. For the purpose of learning the idea behind wall heights being connected and unconnected, we're going to go ahead and select for the exterior walls the highest that we can go. That way we have one solid wall on the outside and we don't have chunks of walls. So go ahead and select 5th floor. And that's going to take our wall from the ground level all the way up to the 5th floor. Notice that the height now kind of grays out, which means you can't change it, because if we ever change the height of our 5th floor, which I'll show you, that's going to actually change our wall height. The location line has to do with where we're creating our wall. So if I zoom in here at one of these intersections, you notice it's set on wall center line. So when I create a wall, it's going to be drawn on the center line of that wall. Notice that the wall is split by that grid line, and that's because the location line is set on wall center line. If I change that to one of these others, say finish face exterior, and click, you'll see now the wall is drawn on the finished face of the wall to the right, and that is aligned to that actual line. So again, this just is going to depend on the structure for the most part of the building, but we're going to kind of ignore that for now, and we're just going to leave it by default at wall center line. Okay, so for this project, I've already kind of went through and sketched out on a piece of paper the way that I want my walls to go. So I'm just going to kind of trace around here. I've made it nice and neat so they just happens to connect at certain points. So follow along best that you can. Oh, one last thing, I'm sorry. One last thing that you're going to want to check. And I close my properties because I don't like my properties. If I open my properties box, I'm sorry, it's not that I don't like my properties, it's I don't like the properties window taking up my screen real estate. So I like my properties, obviously. Properties are what control everything. I just don't like them on my screen when I definitely don't need them. Alright, so right off the bat it tells you what kind of wall you're drawing. And if you select this, this will give you a list of what are system families of walls. And these can be modified. You can create your own off of existing if you want to. You can't get rid of these wall types. These are there by default. These will always be there. So you can see we have exterior walls to choose from here, which would probably be what we want to use in this case later on when we're a little more experienced. But for now, we're just going to stick to the generic 8-inch wall. Okay, that's going to represent our exterior wall for now. And you can also see that there's some interior walls here, which we'll use here later on in this in this video. We'll start to use these interior walls when we get to the inside walls. So for now, exterior walls, generic 8 inches. This other stuff by default is okay for now. We'll come back to that later. So I'm just going to start drawing my predefined shape here. This is a rather large building, so what I decided to do is just kind of do some ins and outs here for the exterior shell. And if you can imagine the way that I had pictured this building sitting, maybe in a downtown situation where it's set back from the sidewalk, so you have your city sidewalk, and then this is a corner of a major intersection or something. So that's the kind of the context that we'll be looking for this building throughout the project. Later, once we start to learn more and more tools, maybe we'll sketch the site in, depending on the time frame that we have. For now, we'll just focus obviously on the insides of the buildings, which is the most important part for us. So also I decided to throw in, obviously nobody wants to walk up large amounts of stairs, so we're going to throw a small shell in here with a couple of elevator shafts. So we'll put those in the center here. And again, I'm going to just use the same wall type. I'm going to use the 8-inch for that, generic. And you'll see, because I have it on wall center line, that's spacing the grid line in the middle, which is okay for what we're doing here. That's what I want for this drawing. So there you have it. There's the exterior walls and the shell. Now, because we had set the height right off the bat to the level 5, if we jump over to an elevation here, you can see now that wall goes all the way up. Okay, the core in the middle and that exterior shell go all the way up to the 5th level. And the wonderful thing about this is, if I decide to budge this, if I decide that I want my 5th level, let's say if I unpin that and select my pin, or select my level here, and I change my height here to 70 feet, you'll notice that the walls go with it, because when we said that we wanted to go up to the 5th floor, Revit automatically locks that level, those walls to that level. So now whatever happens to this level, the walls will move with it. And this is considered parametric data. And it's one of the strong things about Revit when it comes to families and being able to link things to things such as grid lines. In AutoCAD, you can't do that. Well, correct myself, the new AutoCADs are introducing parametric data, so I can't speak for how strong that is yet. Revit was definitely there before AutoCAD in parametric data, so wherever I move this 5th floor, as long as these walls are connected to it, the walls are going to go with it. So I'm going to move that back to 68 feet and pin it. Okay, so there's our elevation. It's drawn in there nice and neat. Our exterior walls there. Now I'm going to go ahead, for the sake of introducing you to the program, I'm going to go up to View, and I'm going to hit 3D View. And that's going to give you a default 3D view of what you've created so far. And it's good to keep checking back here to make sure that you're getting the results that you want. And once you create that 3D view, it's going to drop in your project browser over here under the 3D View tab. And you can rename these as well, and it's good to do that because you're going to end up with probably 40 or 50 3D views when it's all said and done. So it's good to keep an exterior ISO, maybe for isometric, and just make sure that this view always stays exterior ISO. You kind of have to be on yourself. That way, whenever you have a bunch of views, you can come back and refer to this exterior. And you can rotate and pan. I'm panning by holding the middle mouse button in. I'm holding Shift while I hold the middle mouse button in and move my mouse, and that allows me to orbit. So while holding Shift and the middle mouse button, you can orbit around this guy and take looks at different perspectives, so you can see kind of the mass of the building using the quick 3D views. Now this isn't considered a perspective view by any means. You'll create perspective views using cameras, but these give you basic isometric, isometric views of your orthographic elevations. So it's a handy tool to use. So jumping back here to our, let's see. Oh, also notice while we're in this 3D view, we have no floors yet. We haven't created a floor. So when you create walls, it doesn't automatically create floors for you. Floors are separate objects that need to be created. So that's why you can see through the entire building. Now, if we had started creating floors on each of these levels, we've only created the grid lines for these floors. Okay, we haven't actually created a floor by naming this floor. It's important to realize that these are just names of grid lines, reference points. Okay, these do not represent actual geometry. So when we look at this 3D view, we're able to look all the way through this building because we actually haven't created a physical floor yet. And that'll be our next step. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to ground floor. And I'm going to go to the Home tab, and I'm going to find floor, and there's floor. Now these arrows represent things that are, in addition to floor, you have structural floor, floor by face, and slab edge. And each one of these will have different elements that pertain to it. But for now, we're just going to worry about just click on floor. Okay, just like the wall, we're getting a modify tab here that turns green. So everything that turns green has to do with the floor command. You can see there's not a whole lot going on here like there was for wall. We only have the offset tool. The most important thing about the floor tool here is the selection type. Now this tool allows you to select walls, and if you select walls, the floor will be created for those walls. And it's probably the best way to go about doing it if you actually have walls, because that'll lock to your walls. So I'm going to select all of my walls here that I want my floor to be part of. Alright, and I don't want my core to have a floor, so this kind of creates a hole. When you create two shapes like this within a shape, you're creating a hole in this other shape. So this will become solid, this will become open. So you're creating a boundary here, you're creating no floor, floor, no floor. So whenever you have two closed shapes within each other, you create openings. So I could create an opening with this rectangle. If I wanted another opening in my floor, as simple as just drawing a rectangle. This would be open, this would be open, this would all be floor. I don't need that, so I'm going to go ahead and hit tab, select the chain, and hit delete. Now I want to go around and make sure my floor is in the correct location. Now you can see if I were to say okay here, my floor is actually going to be within my walls, and this is also going to come down to construction details on how that's going to be constructed. Luckily we're not going to have to worry about that too much. But for the sake of this, it makes sense for your walls to sit on top of your floor. In this case, your floor is actually going to be attached to the bottom of your wall, which, if this is a slab of concrete, is not correct. The correct way to go about it would be, or if your CMU block or whatever would be there, the floor would rest on top of that and butt in, depending on the detail. And then it would go up. Either way, we're not going to create a floor that ends on the inside of the wall like that, because from a practical standpoint, it doesn't make sense on how that would connect. So, especially for the ground floor, we're going to need to bump that out to the other side. So if I select the line, you'll see these little arrows here. And if I select that arrow, it's going to flip it to the outside. Flips that whole chain to the outside. So now my walls rest on top of my floor, which in this case makes more sense than the other way around. So that all looks good. You want to go around and make sure that the whole thing is correct. Here we're going to need to flip these like that. Okay. Now I hit the check mark to say okay. And that drops a floor in there. So now if I go to my 3D view, now you can see there's a floor that was added onto the bottom here. Now we only added a floor to the ground level because that's the level that we drew on. But now if I go to the bottom, obviously I can't see through because that floor is now there as a barrier in the view. So that is the addition of the first floor there. Now each level is going to need its own floor, so you would go to your next level and do it's the same idea. So I would go to my first floor, and do the exact same thing. Now, when I select these floors, I'm selecting a generic floor. Remember, I closed my properties box because I don't like it there. For you, you might want to keep it open so that you can see what floor you're actually drawing. So I'm drawing these generic floors for now, 12-inch floors. And that's fine for now. We're going to go back through and change this. But if I wanted to change it before I drew it, I could come in here and select, a more detailed floor, such as like a wood truss. Oh, this is a commercial building, so it's probably not going to be a wood truss. And we're not going to do vinyl, so we're going to probably have to create our own floor types as we go along. But the option is there to select a floor, but for now we're going to work with these generic 12-inch floors. And this time, just to show you, I'm going to use a different method for creating my floor here. I could pick my walls, but I'm actually going to use the line tool. And because I'm on the inside of my wall, I'm going to not create the floor to the outside. This time I'm going to create the floor to the inside. And I'm doing this by drawing lines, snapping, using my middle mouse button to scroll and zoom. And I'm just going around and creating lines. Obviously, it's much easier to just select your walls to draw these. But to show you that you could do it this way, I wanted to kind of prove the point. So I'm just going to go around here. Okay, and since my core here is a rectangle, I'm going to change my tool up here to rectangle. And on the outside this time, I'll select that. Now these lock tools are important when they come up, when you get these lock tools. If I was to resize the core, if I did not, let's say if I didn't lock these, okay, I didn't lock these and I come in and I say, well, I want my core to grow up 2 feet in all directions. If I do that without locking these, the floor isn't going to move with the core. If I want to lock my floor boundary to the core, so if I change my core, the floor goes with it, I need to lock these. And we'll see the importance of that as we go along, locking this stuff using the align tool. So for now, we'll lock those. That way, if my core changes, my floor will change with it. So I can hit the check mark to say I like that, and if I go to my 3D view now, I'll have 2 floors here. So let's see. Obviously, it's going to be really hard to see both floors. So to get by that, we create a section. And this is another amazing thing about Revit, is the ability to create sections with ease. Remember, in AutoCAD or even on drawing on boards, sections can be a pain as well as any elevation. Revit does that all for you automatically when you have to put the work in up front, but it'll automatically do that for you. So to create a section, I'm just going to go to any floor here. It doesn't matter necessarily, and ground floor, and I'm going to go to, let's see, view, in section. And from section, I'm just going to drag, let's see which way would be the most interesting. I could do a diagonal. We'll keep it linear. So I'm going to cut through the core. Well, yeah, we'll go ahead and just cut through the core here. Just like that, and it'll give me my default bubble there. You want to keep these nice and neat as much as possible. So I'm going to drag this a little bit closer. I don't need it to overhang that much. And technically, I can put that there. Okay, so I've created a section view. So obviously, anytime I create a view, it appears over here. And here's my building section. Okay, section 1. I could double click on that, or I could double click on my arrowhead here, and it'll take me to the same place. So there's my section of the building. You can see here's the first floor that we created, right? The 12-inch floor. Notice that the floor is created on the level, so when I create my floor, the actual extra 12 inches goes down, which is why if you want at least a 10-foot ceiling, you have to allow these levels to be 12 feet, because you're going to have you're going to probably have a drop ceiling come down here. So even 14 feet might be better. But you need to allow for the thickness of your floor on your other levels, if that makes sense, because otherwise you're cutting into your space. So there's my first floor. There's my ground floor. There's the shaft for the elevators. And I'll start to go through and create these other floors, and I'll see you back here when that's done. Alright, I hope you had fun clicking each wall, making sure everything was inset to the inside. I saved this last floor. There's a couple issues here I want to point out. And the main thing that I really wanted to show you, I haven't created a floor here yet, and I wanted you to go through and practice clicking. What I did not show you was how to do it even faster by using the chain tool. So for this last floor, I've saved this here to show you. So what we're going to do is select our floor tool like we did before, and we're going to make sure that our select wall tool is selected here, or pick walls. Now when I hover over this wall, you can see that it kind of turns blue, and down in the left hand corner of my screen, down here, you'll notice it comes up and shows that I've selected wall, basic wall, generic 8. So it's showing that I'm hovering over this wall. I haven't actually selected it yet. Revit's really good about selecting what's called chains and objects that are underneath of objects by introducing the tab key. So what you do, and the idea is, if you have a wall that's connected like this wall all the way around, this is considered a chain. And when this is selected all the way around, you can hit tab while you're hovering over any of the wall segments. And now if you look down in the lower left hand corner, or this little thing that just came up, it says now I have a chain of wall pre-selected. Now to select this, I still have to left click, and if I left click, that's going to select all of the chain around that wall for you, so you don't have to click each individual segment. And we're going to use the tab technique here. I'll do it again on the inside. Actually, first, before I do that, you can see that this is on the outside. The only wall that should be on the outside is on the ground level, so I'm going to flip that to the inside. Make sure that all of your levels are flipped to the inside. So, yeah, that's all good there. Here I'm going to hit the tab key again. I'm going to hover over one of the wall segments, hit tab, and then click with my left mouse button. That'll select the entire chain without having to select individual chains. So that's another shortcut. And this should be on the outside of the wall, so that's good there. And I'll hit OK. If you get anything about attaching, for now we're not going to attach anything, so you can hit no. And if you've been getting this warning and you hit yes, it's okay. But for now, I'm going to hit no. So that gives me my 5th floor. I'm going to give you a second to look at this and see if you can figure out what's missing. What's missing in this picture as opposed to this picture. Okay, so let me get this. We've got this picture. Alright, look at this picture for a second. Go back to the 5th floor. What's missing? There's something missing here that's pretty important, and it is the grid lines. Okay, for whatever reason, in all of your elevation views, you need to make sure your grid lines go up above the highest level. So if I go to, like, say, my 2nd floor, they're probably still there. No, not even my 2nd floor. 1st floor, maybe. Nope, not even the 1st floor. So what you need to do in this case, whenever your grid lines are missing on your higher floors, is go through your elevations. Obviously, the east elevation is what we've been working on the most, and the east elevation actually looks okay. North elevation, look at this. Your bubbles need to be above the highest level, so that's why they're not showing up on those high levels. So you just need to you have to unpin all of them again, which I guess in this mess might be a good time to introduce filters. And a filter is basically an easy way to select things. The way you use a filter is by selecting everything that you're interested in, even though you're going to get some walls and stuff in there, and the floors. All we're actually interested in are grid lines. So down here in the right hand corner, there's a little filter guy with 9. Tells me I have 9 items selected. If I click on that, you'll see I get the options for floors and grids. Obviously, I only want grids, so I'm going to uncheck floors and hit OK. And you'll see that that deselects floors and only leaves me with grid lines. So now I can come through here and unpin these. So filters are an excellent tool to use when you have a huge mess of items, more so than what we're actually dealing with now. You need to be careful because they're actually unpinned. You don't want to move it side to side like that. You need to make sure that you get a hold of the little bubble and drag it up there. And after that's all said and done, you have to drag a box again You don't really want to pin your section. So use filters again, and uncheck views, and then hit pin. And that'll pin those back in place. Now if I go to my 5th floor, there's my bubbles showing up there. So, and you know, technically on my 5th floor and on my ground floor, I've got bubbles on different sides. So we would need to go through here. I'm not going to do that now for sake of time. Need to go through here and uncheck these, right? I would need to uncheck all of these bubbles at the tops, and then check the bubbles down here to give my bubble at the bottom. I would want this to be consistent with every drawing. So I'll do that there to remind myself to do it in the off time. Make sure that whenever you do your video, or not your video, whenever you do your, make sure whenever you do your grid bubbles, they're consistent along the bottom and the top right. So I'll correct that for future videos is what I meant to say. Okay, so we've got our exterior walls. We're going to focus on now creating some interior walls, some doors, and a couple windows, and then we're going to call it quits for this video. And later we'll pick up, like I said, on the same building, maybe on a different floor, different area, and we'll focus on something else. So for this particular tutorial, you're going to focus on the 3rd floor. So I go to my 3rd floor here. I'm going to look at my elevations here and see. It looks like my floors on this elevation are not all the way over as well, so I'm going to drag those. Well, they're pinned. I'm going to have to select my floors here. They're my levels, not my floors. And unpin those. And then move them over. Really, you have to go through all 4 of your elevations and clean these up. Make sure you do that. Well, these are a little far out there, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. Okay, so back to where I said the 3rd floor is where we're going to create our interior walls for this project or exercise. Again, the bubbles are in the wrong place. I'm going to go back and fix that on my own. You should as well. Make sure your bubbles along the bottom for this project. And for the interior wall, as far as interior walls go, I'm kind of coming up with just a basic layout here. I'm going to go through and draw these in inner dimensions as you go. You can follow along if you'd like. I would recommend it. It's basically really simple. I'm going to create my wall here, save my project. And this time when I go to my properties, I'm going to do an interior wall, 5-inch partition, 2 hour. Okay, so that's basic wall, interior, 5-inch partition. I'm on my 3rd floor here. So by my height constraint, if I'm on my 3rd floor, obviously I want my walls to stop on the 4th floor, which by default the height was selected for me. So that's good, that's what I want. So I'll leave that at 4th. Wall center line is good. And that all looks good. So I'll just start drawing in the walls that I had predetermined here. I'm not worried about dimensions yet. I'm just basically drawing the outline. We'll come in and do the dimension stuff later. So that's the basic layout there. Technically, we should have some columns here, and to be honest with you, I kind of skipped that step, and we'll go back and put the columns in where these intersection goes in the next video maybe. Now I just want to worry about getting these interior walls in there. So I'm just going to keep adding some rooms. There's no system here to what I'm doing. I kind of just want to get us familiar with drawing interior walls. This by no means has been space planned or anything like that with matrices. It's just drawing some lines and making it look like it makes sense for this video. And let's see, one more maybe, two more. Just a conference room on this wing here. And I'm going to select this and delete it. And for that hump there, I'm going to go back to wall. I'm going to select start end radius. Okay, and when it's named that way, when it's named start end radius, that's the click order. So you're going to click the start, and you're going to click the end, and you're going to click the radius. So again, I'll click my start, I'll click my end, and then I'll specify any radius. I'll just click for now to give it an arc there. So this is our elevator core. So we might have some other stuff going on here. For now, this is good. We'll refine this later. Now, when I created these walls, you can see we've got little bumps here, and that's because I created it on this grid line. And that's fine for the exterior walls, but we don't want that little notch. So what you do to clean this up using Revit is their align tool, and you're going to use the align tool a lot. I can guarantee you you're going to use it a lot. So if I go to modify, and you'll see this align tool right here. It looks like a little bar graph or whatever. I'm going to select that. Now when you use the align tool, the idea is to select what you want to align to first and then select what you want to align. So if I want to align this face of this interior wall with the face of this exterior wall, I need to select the face of the exterior wall first and then the face of the interior wall. And you'll see that bumps it out there. It makes it flush and gives me a little lock. Whenever you use the align tool like that, you want to lock it after. Okay, a lock is almost exactly like using a pin, but it has to do with the align tool. So now whenever this wall moves, this wall is going to move with it. If I didn't lock it, that wouldn't be the case. So if I want to make sure that this wall is locked to whatever happens to this wall, I need to lock it after I do my align. So I need to go through here and make sure everything that meets or butts up against an exterior wall is aligned. Here's another good example. So I'll select this wall first because I want to align to that first, and then I'll select that, and then I'll lock it. Okay, that'll lock those in place. And this wall with this wall, and I'll lock it. So now I get that nice transition there. I don't have little bumps coming off the side of it. And there's probably one over here as well. So I need to come over here. Again, select what do I want to align to, and then select the wall to align, and then lock it. Always lock it. Okay, chances are you're going to want it to be attached to that exterior wall, so it's good to always lock that in place. And I think that's all of the ones that we've created there. Now you can use the align tool for other things too. Let's say that I wanted this room to be aligned to this grid line. Okay, I wanted the inside wall face to be aligned here, so I would select my grid line, and I would lock that. See how that took it over and snapped it to that grid line there. And I can lock it. That way, if that grid line ever changes, that wall is based off of that grid line. And you should use align a lot, like I said. And let's say that these are 20, almost what? These are like 20 feet deep or so, 21.6. So those are pretty big rooms. So we might be able to get away for this project with maybe creating some walls in here as well. walls inside a wall. So we've got some sub rooms here for whatever purpose. This could be a big conference room. This could be an exec office with a corner. We maybe could put some windows over here in the future. We'll focus on, and this could be a public area. We've obviously got some huge hallway space here, and once we decide where we're going to put our elevator doors, we can start building some walls on this core as well. I'm almost positive I want to put the elevator doors on this side, and we'll go ahead and do that now. We can move it later. So I'm going to hit my wall key again. And again, I'm not going to focus on getting it perfectly but there for now, because we can come back and do that with the align tool, right? So I'm just going to draw that, rough it in in Revit. In Revit, you should just draw it, and then after you draw it, you go back and add the aligns or dimensions. So again, modify, align. I'm going to align that, again, lock it. And lock that. Alright, so this is our elevator core here. And we can go ahead just to remind ourselves for now. This is by no means a room tag. This is don't consider this a room tag, just consider this a note to yourself. Elevators. And we'll change this later with a room tag, but so we don't start drawing any walls, and since we're kind of designing as we go along, I'll just put that in there as a note, so I don't create any walls in there and forget that this isn't my elevators. So we've got a space here. Looks to be a corridor. I need to make sure that corridor is legit. So I select this wall here, and you can see from the center line to the center line is 10 feet 8. These are 5-inch walls. Let's say you didn't want to do the math. You see these little blue dots here? You can drag those out to the face of the wall. Well, if wall center is not selected. Let's see. I'm going to change my location line here to finish face exterior. You see that move my dot there. Still seems to be snapping. Alright, so it looks like it might have to do with this wall type. Usually, without a problem, you're able to move these extension lines to the face of the wall and measure. But if this wall type, for any reason, won't allow us to do that, see if we can get a exterior wall here. Yeah, so see how I was able to move that dot to that center line? It's kind of the same idea with this interior wall here. Okay, at any rate, 10 feet 8 is acceptable for a corridor there. We could even make this a little bit smaller if we wanted to. Let's make it 8 feet. So to do that, I'm going to select the wall that I want to move, and then I'm going to select the temporary dimension and 8 feet, and that'll move that wall up to there. Okay, so that's even even better. And partition there. I'll start to actually give these things some actual sizes so you can match it. And I'll make this 15 feet. Let's see, this is 10.9. I'll make this 8 feet. Leftover should be 13.6. I'll make this 13.6. Make that 8 feet. Now this, let's say I wanted to measure from center to center on this wall instead of measuring from that. This is another good example where you want to use this blue dot and drag it to the center of that wall. Now I can enter the dimension that I know here instead of the dimension that I wouldn't know there. Make this 21'6". That way those guys are the same. Maybe these could be the restrooms. It looks like we're going to need to add some wall as well here. So that hallway would have been enough for a semi to drive through, so we'll make that hallway a little bigger. That one seemed to align okay. This one down here looks like it gave me a little bit of a bump. So use the modify tool and the align tool. Lock it. And I need to make sure that my hallways are consistent here. That hallway's 8 feet if you remember, so I'm going to make this one 8 feet. I kind of like the idea of maybe putting an island here for some reason. Maybe this will be the frame for some cubicles. So what I'll do here is again come with my wall. And since this isn't really a major corridor, we can empty that. So in AutoCAD, if you remember, you could do a trim, or you could even maybe do a break here. There's a couple ways we could approach this. We can drag this dot to this line. We can split this, delete this segment, and trim this segment. It's probably the best two ways. I think probably the proper way to go about doing it, to make sure you don't mess up by dragging. Sometimes when you start dragging, you mess things up on accident. So the best way to do this, I think, is by using the split element, and I'll split that anywhere in between there and there. I'll split it. And then I'll select this extra segment and hit delete. And then I'll trim this. Now, trim's a little bit different than in AutoCAD. And Revit, when you trim, you just select the two corners you want to keep. You don't necessarily select a boundary. So I'll select that and that line, and that'll trim that. Okay, so again on this one, we're going to use the split tool anywhere in between here. It doesn't matter. It could be here if you wanted to, just as long as you're splitting that line. And then from there, you delete the one you don't want, and you use the trim tool here to select the corner that you're going to keep, and that will give you that open space there. And again, we can make this opening somewhat smaller, to maybe 6 feet or so. It's not necessarily the public route. This outside edge here is more public. And we'll experiment what to do with this later. So that means we're good up to here. We'll keep this as how it is. We'll change this room to closest seems to be 20 feet. Let's make that room 20 feet. That room should still be 21.6. Okay, good. This arc we'll go ahead and refine and make it an even number. Nobody likes crazy numbers like this, so we'll say that 50 feet is pretty close to that. So we'll make that radius 50 feet. So yeah, that's starting to come together somewhat. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and stick with these walls for now, and we're going to fade out here. We'll come back and we'll add some doors and some windows, and that'll be it for this exercise. All right, so just a quick recap. We've done a lot in this video. We went through the grids, the levels, and we've started with the exterior walls. We've started with interior walls. We've even introduced the idea of sections so that we can see our progress as we go. So I can throw that section in there now, and you can start to see that third floor there where we're starting to add some interior walls. So Revit's helping us as we go along by creating these views that, and AutoCAD would take much longer. Now, obviously, if we had some custom stuff, it's going to take some time up front. We're using the really generic stuff now, so saving us some time as far as upfront work goes. We're just pretty much placing stuff just to get used to the idea now. We'll refine that later with custom wall types, custom doors, and so on and so forth. So if we take a look here at our 3D view, introduce a new concept. That looks great if we were interested in a cardboard box. We can't see the third floor with this view, and this is our exterior ISO. So what I recommend is we'll keep this view as our 3D exterior ISO, just as it says, and we'll create a copy. We'll duplicate this view with detailing. Okay, so I right click on this, go to duplicate view, duplicate with detailing. It's going to give me a copy. I'm going to rename this as third floor exterior ISO. Okay, this tells me that I'm interested only in the third floor exterior ISO. So in order to do this, now I need to start hiding some stuff. And in Revit, you can select elements and hide it, and there's a couple different ways that you can hide elements. You can temporarily hide elements, or you can hide them permanently. So if I want to temporarily hide something, I can select it, and down here you'll see this guy with the sunglasses. If I select that and hit hide element, it's going to temporarily hide that element. And you can see that I'm temporarily hiding something when this screen goes this way. This means this is only temporary. Anytime I come back, if I go to exterior here, third view here, it's still temporary. It's not necessarily a drawing thing. If I click on this, hit reset, it'll go away. Okay. Now if I want to permanently hide something corresponding to the view, now remember, each one of these is its own view. So if I hide something to a view, it's going to hide it permanently on that view. So if I select this object, and I want this to always be hidden because I'm only worried about the third floor in this view, remember. So I never really need this if I'm only interested in the third floor. So in that case, I right click and I hit hide in view elements. Now notice there's nothing that comes up here. That's permanently hidden. It's undoable in the future if you want to, but it takes extra steps. It's not like I can just come down here and hit the sunglasses. So what you're seeing here is actually the wall lines on the next floor. So I need to get rid of this fourth floor as well. So I need to find a spot that when I highlight it, it says floors, and I can click that, and then I can hide that element. So again, hide in view elements. There are the walls for the third floor. So now this view only, remember this exterior is the original. We made a copy, and now we're able to hide things dependent on that view of that space. So anything that I hide that's view dependent only relies on the view that you hide it in, not the original views, or any other view for that matter. So this one's still intact. The other floors are hidden on this one, so I can see now my third floor walls. So it's kind of a cool feature of being able to hide things, to be able to see different levels. So we can see that our progress is going well. So let's go ahead real quick and start dropping in some doors. This video I know is getting to be a little bit longer than the other one, but this is the basis of Revit. There's a lot to accomplish here, so there is a lot to cover. I want to make sure we get a good, solid understanding. All right, so we're going to focus on this area. For some reason, I like it, and there's some places that we can really use some doors and windows. So go to the Home tab, go to the Door tab. All right, so Again, things turn green here. This just means that this stuff has to do with the door tool. Right click if you don't have your properties, open up properties. That way we can see what kind of door we're working with here. By default, Revit loads the single flush family. Okay, this is considered a family of doors, and the name of that family is single flush. Just like my last name is Batten, this last name for this family is single flush. So you're going to find out that there's going to be different families for different door styles. So this would be the siblings of that family. So this is like Johnny or whatever kid name that you like, just consider that these are the kids of this family. And you can create as many kids as you want or as little as you want, depending on what you're going to need. Obviously, an 36-inch by 84-inch door is standard, right? I mean, this is a 3-foot door that's 7 feet high. That's pretty typical of a door. Here's a little bit more of a specialty 80-inch door, still 36, some smaller doors, okay? Usually you wouldn't go any smaller than that. And if you went any bigger than that, you might be considering a double door or something similar. And we're going to focus on creating our own families of doors in the future, but for now, just realize these are the standard ones. Now, Revit even gives you more than just a single flush. Sometimes you're going to want more than just a single flush door. That's really boring. It's really simple. So if you want to see what else Revit has, notice under here there's a thing called Load Family. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to go to Doors. Here are all the other families. Okay, consider these as last names. These last names are going to have children even more defined than the actual door type itself. So there's going to be door sizes and double flush, just like single flush has door sizes. So if we pick something a little more fancy, see if there's a panel door here. We should have a single panel. So this door, instead of just having a flush panel like over here, this door, or I'm sorry, just a flush slab, this door actually has panels. And you can see there's different orientations of panels on these doors. And there's just a bunch to choose from. You know, like I said, these are the ones from Revit. You can even make your own based off of these if you want to. Kind of like the idea of using glass doors here, but I don't really want doubles. So I'll do a single glass door. So I'm going to load this single glass. I don't really know if I want panes. Let's see. We'll just go with single glass one for now. Now you can see that loads in here. It doesn't get rid of the fact that single flush was already open either. So as you open these, they'll collect in the properties box under this drop down for things that you can use in the future. So my single flush door is still in here, but I also have now the addition of this glass. So I'm just going to select 36 by 84. I'm going to close my properties thing for now. Now you'll see when I come out here and hover over the walls, it automatically drops it in. If I more up to the north of the wall, it gives me the door swing in. More to the south, it gives me the door swing out. So I think for this case, put the door there for now. I'm just clicking these in here, not really worried about the orientation or the placement just yet. All right, so you'll notice, again, right off the bat, it's dropping these door tags in here, which if you've been through construction documents, you might have a little better understanding of what these are for. If not, you will know that eventually through the end of this class that they're extremely important, and we don't necessarily want to get rid of them, but at the same time, we don't really want them there now. So if you think back to the concept of the floors and the view, what we had talked about before is we don't want to delete the floors necessarily, we just want to hide them. So in the same sense, we don't really want to delete these tags, we just want to hide them. So in this entire drawing, I don't really want any tags. So what I can do is select one of these tags and right click, hide in view, but instead of elements, I'm going to select category. And by selecting category, it's going to hide any door tag that's in this entire drawing from showing. Now, if I just did element, it would only hide that one single door because that's considered an element. So if I want to hide all of the elements, I got to hide the category. So I'll hide category, and you'll see all of them disappear. And we'll see how to get those back later. The important part is we want to keep them, but we don't want to delete them, but we also don't want to see them. So we're going to hide them, and you're going to hide stuff a lot, and that's the difference between the element and the category. Okay, so with these doors here, we can see that this swing is a little bit off. If you select the category, just like the grid lines and the floor boundary, you get your arrows. If you want the door to swing the other way, you hit this up-down arrow. See how it's flipping the actual in-out door swing. If you want it to be left-hand, right-hand, you select the one to the side-to-side. So we want this orientation for this door. We typically, 2 feet is a little much for the back side of the door, depending on your design. For me, I like to keep it nice and snug, so I'll probably leave enough room for the door trim and some little extra space, so I might leave 8 to 10 inches here. But again, it depends on the designer and what you want to do. So you can see when I click on this, it's measured to the center of the door, but I know the dimension from here to what I kind of want to leave here. So I'll drag this so that it's flush with the back side of the door. So now my measurement, including the inside of the door, there is 10 inches. That gives me about 8 inches. Again, if I wanted to flip the swing of this door, I could. Technically, whenever you get into the building code situation, this door may have to swing out that way. I doubt that door would. It would just depend, I guess, on the codes. For now, we're not really worried about that. We'll just create our doors to make them look great. So this door, we'll go ahead and leave swinging out, but we'll move it over. And I'm going to just drag this, click and hold, and move it over till it aligns. So if I wanted these doors to always be aligned, I could use my align tool here. That way, if I move one door, it moves both doors. So if I go to modify, align, I want this door to be aligned here, so I select the center line of this door, and then I select the center line of that door, and you'll see that it locks those doors in place. And what that means is if I come in here and change this door, notice it's bringing the other door with it. So that's a good example of how the align tool works. The align tool locks things in place to work off of each other. So align tool is extremely powerful when it comes to parametric data. Alright, so let's do one more door here. And I'm going to add a double door for this, what looks like would be a conference room. So again, I'll go to Home, I'll go to Door. The door that I want isn't loaded yet, so I need to hit Load Family, hit Doors. I'm going to do a double glass door with maybe some panes in this one, some lights, and once that loads, you'll see there's my double door. I'll just click anywhere there, select my door, and let's see. Place it wherever makes sense. I'm using my arrow key to nudge this over. Okay, so I can nudge stuff with my arrow keys. I'm going to nudge it. Looks like I'm not going to be able to get exact without maybe 17'9", but we'll leave it at this for now, 17'10" and 17'8". Okay, I know that a section view exists. This is going to get in my way, so I'm going to select it. Right click, I'm going to hide that in view by elements so that it's not on my way anymore. Notice my section view is obviously still accessible down here. I just don't want the section marker there right now. So there's the section of our third floor. And if we jump to the third story, we'll see that those doors are being placed in there. Nice and neat. There's my double glass door, my single doors. Hold Shift, remember I can orbit. So that shows you those doors there. Windows are added the exact same way, so I'll add the windows and we will call it a day. Let's see if I go to third floor and we'll focus on these areas here. I'll select windows. We'll go to properties. We'll see that a really plain fixed window is in there now. This is a commercial building, so technically it's probably going to be some kind of either crazy glazing where it's has a glass shell. We don't have actually 8-inch walls. You really probably won't see, especially on the upper floors, any windows that are going to open. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the windows under the window load family here. So these are all the windows offered by Revit, the default windows. And obviously we can create custom windows as well. So fixed is open now. See fixed with trim. So we'll just go ahead and work with what we have with the fixed window here for this. And I'll make it as big as I can, 36 by 72. And it's just as simple as clicking, just like we were doing before, maybe a couple windows a room. Notice that Revit's automatically placing these window tags, just like door tags. So we treat those the same way. So we want to get rid of all window tags. So you just select one of them, go to hide and view by category, and that'll get rid of all those. Now, when you look at these windows, you should notice one thing. They're actually backwards. When you think of a windowsill, usually you have more space on the inside than you do the outside. And it all comes down to the actual window, so you need to flip those the other way. Do that by selecting the window and hitting the double arrow. There we go. And you place these, the way that you would place anything. And that's good. I mean, I'm not too worried about where you place your windows here. Just worried that you actually place them correctly with the correct orientation. So I go to my 3D view now. You'll see those windows are placed in there on the outside of the building. So you can see Revit's a powerful tool when it comes to this, because when it comes to drawing elevations, that stuff is going to already be done for you. You're not going to have to focus on it. All this stuff's already going to be done for you, so it's just more work up front. So switching to my shaded view there. It actually looks like we're cutting in there. We shouldn't be cutting in there. So let's take a look at that. There's the wireframe view. Hidden line. You know what that probably has to do with is this line needs to be outside the building. If you remember these blue lines, if you select your triangle here, this blue line should not only be outside the building, it should also be the link. Let's see if that messes with her. Okay, see how we're cutting in? We're seeing floor levels. We shouldn't be seeing floor levels in elevations. So to fix that, you need to select your elevation triangles and make sure that your blue lines are actually outside the building. This one's way inside. It's no good. So we want to move those outside. There we go. So now we don't see the floor levels. We see our windows in that elevation from the outside. And that would be correct, opposed to what we were seeing before. Here we see the little in and out of the building and the elevation. So powerful tool, Revit. We're going to get to know a lot about it. I want to just give you the introduction of this. So you're going to need to go through this, create everything you see as you see it. I'll make sure to type up the formal exercise sheet as normal, but this should at least get you somewhat started. I think it's pretty self-explanatory of what actually need to do. Just follow along. Good luck. Make sure you let me know any questions that you might have. See you next week.